Garden Success is brought to you in part by Martha's Bloomers, offering an expansive collection of plants and tools for the gardener, a boutique store filled with art and home decor, and an award-winning full-service restaurant featuring handcrafted meals and desserts. Martha's Bloomers, located right off Highway 6 in Navasota.
Welcome to Garden Success with Stephen Brueggerhoff, the show designed to help you have a bountiful garden and a beautiful landscape. Call in now with your lawn and garden questions at 979-845-5689 or email your questions to gardensuccess@tamu.edu. And now, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension horticulturist Stephen Brueggerhoff.
Well, howdy, friends, and welcome to Garden Success. It is another crisp day. It's a little bit crisper than it was last week. You know, I measured the temperature clocking in around 20 degrees Fahrenheit this morning. That is pretty cold. It's the kind of cold that when you walk out the front door, you don't know whether you're coming or going. Yes, it's pretty challenging. And, of course, you've heard me say this before, the plants are responding. And they are not responding well, at least for the ones that I haven't covered. So, you know, I did the right thing. I went out and covered the plants that I've got that I wanted to save or conserve. I covered back up the canna lilies that I have outside. That vegetable garden that I keep talking about, the raised bed, of course, we've got it strategically positioned. So we have these hoops that we've created over it, put a frost cloth over the top of that, and then I just took a bale of hay. I took parts of a bale of hay and tucked it in around the plants and mounded it over the plants. And that's what saved some of my plants this last freeze. And, you know, fingers crossed, I'm hoping that I did the right thing and I've provided enough insulation to protect those plants. So, you know, just hang on, folks. I think it's probably about another week of this, right? We have a couple of more days of really cold temperatures in the early morning. This information may help. Certainly it helps me to be prepared. Always save your pipes, your friends, your pets first. Plants come last. I hate to say that, but, you know, it's important to make sure that we're all in good spirits and in good health so that we can practice good gardening skills at our home landscape or with our neighbors or at a community garden. Remember, folks, this is a call-in program, and we'd love to hear from you, hear about your garden successes, as well as some of the trepidation that you've had over the past couple of days with these hard freezes. Go ahead and call us at 979-845-5689. Well, of course, since the last time that we talked to one another on this program, since last week, I have had a couple of emails, and one I wanted to address. A gentleman had sent in an email last week. As a matter of fact, he may have even called, and I talked to him on the air. I'm reviewing this really quickly. Let's see if I can find it. Yes, a gentleman named Dan had called up, and he had sent me a picture. It was a beautiful picture of a pepper plant. He identified it as a pepper, and he had brought it in from outside into his greenhouse. And he had a flat, semi-transparent insect that seemed to be laying eggs on it. And last week I was stumped. I couldn't think of what it might be. I suggested, well, possibly it's an aphid. Potentially it could have been a scale insect. And so I did the right thing. I sent off this image to one of our esteemed colleagues and entomology specialist, Wizzy Brown. Wizzy is a good friend, as well as provided some training for us a couple of days ago, about a week ago, for our master gardeners that we were training. We're currently in the around the middle of training new Texas master gardeners for our county. And I sent this picture to her, and she sent back a response really quickly. She said, what it is, it's a whitefly nymph. So I'd never seen that stage of development of whitefly before. So it's very transparent. It's a very small insect, and it had this glorious cluster of eggs, a little trail of eggs that it was leaving behind. So, Dan, I'm proud to say that we've identified what it is, but unfortunately, it's a pest we don't want to continue to cultivate. And I know you're not cultivating it, Dan, just saying, we know what it is and how to address it. As far as protecting the plants or getting rid of the whitefly can be a little bit problematic. Those insects, they can replicate really, really quickly. You can get a pretty fast infestation of those insects if you're not taking care of them. And I think I remember that I recommended possibly using safer soap, which is appropriate for these plants, or you could use a horticultural oil, specifically a neem oil, that may be able to address it. But you're going to have to be vigilant, Dan, because these insects can build up populations pretty quickly. Now, you could use a systemic on it, but I always caution against using those systemics. Systemics are neonicotinoids if the plant's in flower, which if it's a pepper, it's probably not right now. But of course, that can affect those insects that are visiting those flowers. So it's best to try to manage it as best you can with safer soap or horticultural oil. See how successful you are with that. And now that you have it indoors, Dan, you might want to separate it out from the rest of the plants as well. Kind of put it in a little quarantined area, a little hospital that you have, a corner of your greenhouse, just to keep it separate from the other plants. Oh, another thought, Dan. One method that I've found has been effective at cutting back the population of these insects is by putting out a little yellow sticky trap. So there are products that are sold, and I've got some at my house. There's a product that is manufactured by a company. I don't want to start putting out, brand names or endorsing any kind of product. Certainly, that's not what we're about. But there are products that are available that they're like little thin strips that are colored yellow, and they've got a coating that makes them sticky. And so in this product, they've got a tiny little plastic post. You take this strip, you go ahead and bend it back, you mount it onto the plastic post, and you set that in the pot, the potted plant that you have. The insects are attracted to that yellow color, that frequency, and they land on that and they get stuck and they don't go anywhere. They die on that. So it's been very effective for me while I've been raising or germinating tomato seeds for production, right? So instead of now you can use that in combination with some pesticides that are safe to use indoors. So Dan, I hope that information helped you out, and I'll respond to your email as well. Well, folks, 979-845-5689. You'll be with me for the next 50 minutes, and I'm looking forward to serving you and talking about your successes or possible challenges that you're having in the garden. Now, I have had some other inquiries that came in through email. The inquiries that have come in really were, one of them is more current. I've got some others that are referencing some issues in the garden from this previous fall. But I think I'll start off with this one question. And it's a question that I've gotten quite frequently when I lived along the Gulf Coast. It's a specific plant that we look at as a tree, but it's really not a tree. Biologically, it's not. So the question is from June. She has a question about a palm tree. She said that she tried to protect her palm tree using old-fashioned Christmas lights during the last freeze. So this was about a week and a half ago that she did this. She says she thinks she saved the core, but the fronds are all dead. And if they're going to lose the fronds anyway, why don't we cut them off before the frost? She just wanted some advice on proper action to take to help out her plant. Well, my response is this, right? And I wrote this in an email back to her. While it can be unsightly and tempting to remove dead palm fronds after a freeze, it's always best to leave them on the plant until we are past these current and potential freeze events. So one thing that I did ask her that wasn't included in the email is how she protected the plant with lights. So did she just take some Christmas lights and wrap the trunk only? What kind of palm tree is it? So that was more of a specific question back to her, whether it's a true palm or another form that we often associate with palms they're called sago palms. So sago palms are not true palm trees. They're a separate entity, separate species, but they both act the same way. So I needed to understand how she covered that trunk. Was it a low-growing palm? I think there's one called a pindo palm that doesn't grow very tall. There's some species that get about the size of a person. You know, I'm 6'4". Some palm trees are species grow to about that height or maybe a little bit higher, so we can actively cover them or protect a part of the plant that I'll talk about in just a minute. So my question again back to her is, how did you cover that? Was it just the trunk? The best method for conserving palms is to protect the top growth of the plant. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Biologically speaking, again, palms are not true woody species. They're not trees. Now, of course, our global culture, we claim them among the stately woody trees that we cultivate at our homes or in our neighborhood landscapes. Palms are amongst plant species that are grass-like flowering plants. I know that's hard to imagine. You look out your window, and you see these stately palms when you're sipping your pina colada on the beach, you know. They're just beautiful plants, of course. But they're not. They are not woody species. They're not like a woody tree that produces branching structures. Palms grow from a central point at the end of their trunk called the apical meristem. So an apical meristem is rapidly dividing cells at the tips of plant roots and shoots. Now new fronds emerge from this endpoint, and as the plant grows, the fronds appear to cascade down from the top of the palm and along the sides of the trunk. Now when I was living out along the Gulf Coast, down around Houston, I was working for Galveston County, I was working for Brazoria County. The typical maintenance plan for palm trees is to cut off all of those fronds along the trunk. So when you see a true palm that maybe is cruising up about 20 feet in the air, or even smaller palms, their natural habit is to hold on to those fronds all the way down to almost our eye height along the trunk. But the aesthetics, right, the culture of maintaining these palms is to remove those palms. So again, I'll repeat what I was just talking about. I think I got lost a little bit in my own dialogue, got lost in my head. So again, palm trees grow from their apical meristem, which is the top of the tree. Fronds are produced from that point, and as the plant elongates, they leave those fronds along the trunk. And then our habit, of course, is to want to clean up those fronds and just chop them off. Now, knowing this information, if the palm tree was not covered to protect that point of growth, it could freeze and be damaged. And if there is a frond that's growing from that point, right along the top, and it appears dead, it could be attached still to living tissue. So removing that frond, it may accidentally kill that palm or cause a further decline if it's already in decline. That was a long way for me to say, June, probably best to just leave it alone. Just let it be ugly for a little while. Ugly can be beautiful as well. It's all in the eye of the beholder, right? Doesn't mean that you have to cut off those palm fronds. Just let it go for a little bit and wait for some of these freeze events to get through. And then if you feel like you need to remove some of those fronds, do it after these freeze events. There's articles online, of course, that you can search from reputable organizations like Louisiana State University Extension, which offers some information on palm tree culture as well. Well, thank you very much, June, for sending that in. I love to talk about some of these not quite usual, but a little unusual, but usual for me, questions that I used to get in the coast, and I'm grateful that you're actually cultivating palm trees here in our area. So I've got a question for you folks. Can you name a native palm tree? A palm tree that occurs naturally in Texas. There's 2 species that I'm thinking of, but I'd like you to call up and let me know what they are at 979-845-5689. If we don't get an answer this week, we'll wait till next week and I'll give you the answer. It encourages you to continue to fully participate with this program. And I thank you certainly for your patronage. We have another question from a gentleman named Glenn. Well, actually, I think I'm going to skip that one because it's quite complex. And if you call in, I'm going to have to stop that story, certainly because I'd love to talk to you. But I do have another question that is a little bit shorter. It's from a resident named Lynn. Lynn said she missed her chance to get rid of fall aster in her yard. And she said it's all black and woody remnants now. How can she get ahead of it, right? This plant that we look at as a weedy species in our yard for next year. So this kind of goes a little bit along the same lines as explaining the biology of a palm tree. Knowing what the plant is, understanding its growth habit and biology, helps us to understand how best to work with the plant. So as part of our Texas Master Gardener training, we're training individuals that want to make a difference in our community. Individuals that would like to learn a little bit more about best practices in gardening for self-fulfillment, but that have a passion for working within our community, for community service, effective community service, making a difference in the lives of our residents with the knowledge that we're sharing. And all of this is sponsored by Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. We're an outstanding organization, and by gosh, we should be standing on our podium and telling all the folks about the great work that we're doing. So, part of what we're training our master gardeners is to use diagnostic skills that we derive from a practice called integrated pest management, right? So we're trying to identify what the problem is, identify an insect, or diagnose a disease if we can. Sometimes we do that by visual observation. Sometimes we can do that if the description is well enough from an email, but pictures say 1,000 words, right? I know that's cliche, but certainly it does help us as a diagnostic tool. And so I know exactly what she's talking about, right? She called it fall aster. I've experienced the same thing in my yard and the landscape that I have, and I'm sure you may have as well. It's this tiny little low-growing annual that has like really simple linear leaves. It almost looks like it's hugging the ground. Can often grow in small clumps or mats, right? It doesn't lift very far up off the ground. They do look beautiful, right? They'll produce tens of flower heads with yellow disc and often white ray flowers. They look a lot like a diminutive daisy. So you may know what I'm talking about, especially if you saw them start to cruise through your lawn this past fall. Well, again, I did have them in my yard, and I know that Lynn has them as well. So we share the same experience. So we know it's an annual, but this species is interesting. It's Symphyotrichum subulatus. That's the taxonomic name for it. Just trying to be fancy, folks. But fall aster is an annual that can act as a perennial. So we call that perennate. Got to use these terms. You learned them in college. You got to use them, right? So it's perennate. And of course, the description of it is starts out as an herbaceous species, but it starts becoming a little bit more woody as it fully develops. And then, of course, it blooms in the fall. You've got each flower may contain up to 50 seeds, potentially up to 50 seeds. So you have the plant that potentially has the ability to produce more the following year. Pretty cool, I think. And oftentimes you'll see them proliferate in areas that are either a little bit dry or somewhat nutritionally deficient, the soil that is. So it can, because of its biology and growth habit, it can be a little bit challenging to control in the lawn or the landscape. It matures late in the fall season and in areas where it persists. Now, once it does die back, as we approach the end of fall, it does kind of turn black. So it kind of leaves these black patches in your yard. Just doesn't look that good aesthetically. For the ones in my yard, I know, it's much easier for me when I see them in the yard just to take a garden hoe and kind of pop them out of the ground. Now, they do have a little bit of a taproot rooting structure that kind of holds fast to the soil, but I'm still able and willing to get out there and do a little bit of sweat equity to get those plants out of the ground, just kind of pop them up out where I see them. It's important to do this before they really start to have bud break or develop those seeds. Once they're in flower, anticipate you might have it again the following year. So it's best to get ahead of those plants as you can. They grow so low in the lawn profile that it's difficult to just mow them down. And believe me, I've tried. So for me, I understand the best way for me to deal with it, just a little bit of sweat equity. But not all of us have an opportunity to maintain their yard that way, whether it's time management or physical ability. It's not your fault that you can't take care of that way. So if you can't, there are some herbicides that have been rated for use to control that, pre-emergent herbicides. So for Lynn, of course, I did recommend to her that she could kind of get ahead of that by applying a pre-emergent herbicide that contained an active ingredient called isoxaben. I would spell that out. So it's almost spelled like the Red Sox, right? Isoxaben. And it can be applied by mid-March. So we're trying to get ahead of this plant that has dormant seeds in the lawn that will begin to germinate once we get average temperatures around 70, soil temperatures around 70 to 75 degrees. I did find a website where I could, it was provided by a commercial entity that does have a graph where I could, over a 10-year period, I could see where our average soil temperatures start to increase as we start cruising into summer. So I figured that's probably around early April, right? So we're trying to apply a product, a pre-emergent herbicide, that almost matches the time that those plants would be germinating as well. And we estimate that plant is going to germinate somewhere around early April for us in this region. Depending on where you are in Texas, that's going to be different, right? But for us here in the College Station area in Bryan, our soil temps start increasing to around 70 to 75 degrees, and it's estimated around early April. So that does not mean that that our resident is going to be successful at eliminating an entire population. You can apply a pre-emergent herbicide, that might reduce the population somewhat as we cruise into fall and as these plants are trying to develop. There will be some that will escape that application, and so we're back to square one. The best method for taking care of this, of course, is a little bit of muscle and popping those plants out when you can identify them and see them. Now, there are products that have an active ingredient like 2,4-D that can be used as a post-emergent herbicide. Post-emergent meaning they're already present in the lawn, right? But, again, try to lessen those kind of applications if you can, and just get out there and just pop them out of the ground when you see them. So thank you, Lynn, so much for sending in this question. I love to look up this kind of information. It helps me as a gardener, and I know that, of course, some of the practices that I'm trying to use in my own landscape, I'm asking y'all to observe that as well. Again, identifying what the problem is can lead us to the best resolution for dealing with it. And sometimes it's just using your muscles to get out there, depending on your circumstance and the infestation or the problem. How bad is it? Do you really need to address it? I think a good one that's kind of related to that. Have y'all ever grown a vining plant called passiflora, passion flower? If you've grown these plants out, they're a vining plant. There are some that are native to Texas. I can't remember how many native species there are. I know there's at least 4, but they're not as showy as the cultivated passion flower that we might get at a retail outlet. Passion flowers they're just gorgeous flowers, right? They look like this little crown, nice frilly reproductive organs and filaments that are on top of that flower. And then the flower itself has these little frills that it produces. I'd suggest that if you're not familiar with passion flower, go ahead and look that up on the internet. See if you can find one that just look outstanding. Some of them that have been hybridized or that have been cultivated have a cinnamon scent to them. So they look glorious. But they can be very aggressive in the landscape. Now, fortunately, they are a host plant for a butterfly that we love to see in our gardens, and the butterfly is called the Gulf fritillary, or fritillary. Depends on which part of Texas you're from and how you pronounce that. I believe it's spelled Fritillary. But these are butterfly species that have evolved to use the passion flower or the passion flower vine as a host plant. The vine itself produces, I'm not going to say what it does because I can't really remember correctly what that is, if it's cyanide compounds, but certainly it does have toxic compounds that the plant itself produces in its vegetation. But the insect has evolved over time to metabolize that. And so you have this beautiful little orange and speckled white butterfly, adult, that's cruising around. Female finds the plant, lays eggs on it. Of course, the eggs hatch and you get a larvae or a caterpillar, or as your neighbors might call them, worms. They're not worms. They are larvae. They're caterpillars, right? But they cruise through and they just start devouring that plant. So you've got a passion flower that can be aggressive in the landscape. They sucker quite readily. You can have one maybe appear to die back in the winter time. And then springtime, you'll see it coming up 5 feet from the place that you planted it, right? So it can be a little bit aggressive in the landscape. But there is somewhat of a balance with these butterflies that we're trying to attract to our yard. And so the insects do use that, the butterflies do use that as a host plant, and they're voracious. Sometimes they'll start to eat it down. You have to make a decision with that passion flower. Are you using it as a host plant? Are you using it as an attractant for these butterflies? Are you using it just for its aesthetic quality, as beautiful as it can look? And then you have to make a decision. Are you just going to let it go? I'd suggest yes, create a balance with nature. Provide that host plant for the butterfly species that uses that plant for nourishment, and if some of it's damaged, it's quite all right. That particular plant is going to come back pretty voraciously. So just a little bit of food for thought, if you will. All right, folks, I think we're about 30 minutes into the show, and I do like to promote some of the programs that are happening around town in Bryan and College Station. As a matter of fact, we had a really good program this past Saturday. Let's see, today's the 20th. Last Saturday, the 15th, February the 15th, our Brazos County Master Gardeners, with support from the Brazos Valley Groundwater Conservation District, we put on a rainwater harvesting program. So we had individuals that would sign up. It was fee-based, but we had a really good turnout for it. We had 50 rain barrels that we constructed with 50 of our residents, and then we had an additional 30 to 35 residents that just attended the seminars that we put on prior to the workshop. We had a really good turnout, folks. It was about 80 to 85 people that were there, and of course, nobody was fighting with each other. We were all having a good time. We had seminars that were provided by our Brazos County Master Gardeners, talking a little bit about rainwater conservation. We had exhibitors there from the city of College Station, water resources coordinator. She couldn't make it out that day, but we had a table available for her, and we're recognizing the great work that the city of College Station is providing for resource conservation, as well as the outstanding work that the Brazos Valley Groundwater Conservation District is providing to our residents. It was a great turnout, and I had a great time, and I thank our residents for attending that program. We'll have another one. It may not be for another year. We have to gather our breath and continue to provide other education programs, like next Tuesday, February the 25th, at our Brazos County AgriLife Extension Office, which is in Bryan, 4153 County Park Court. At 6 p.m. in the evening, there is no admission for this program. We'll have a guest speaker talking about soil, right? The importance of soil and soil as a living entity. If you would join us, we'd love to have you. Again, that's Tuesday, February the 25th. It's part of our monthly Brazos County Master Gardeners meeting, but we decided to host education programs that are open to the public on those monthly programs. So if you could join us, we'd love for you to do that. I'm a little curious about this next event on Friday, February the 28th, at the Leach Teaching Gardens. So that's the gardens at Texas A&M University, which is off of John Kimbrough Boulevard on campus. There's going to be a celebration for the International Darwin Day, International Celebration of Darwin Day. So it's going to be an annual celebration of all things biology. It's an evening program from 5 to 8 p.m. on February the 28th. And again, there's no admission for that program. They just want you to come and learn. This is sponsored by the TAMU Ecology and Evolutionary Biology program, part of Texas A&M disciplines. And then I'm really excited about this program. Yours truly, if you want to get to know what Stephen B. looks like, you can look on the internet. You can look on the website of KAMU, right? I'm sure there's a picture of me somewhere. But you can see me in person. You'll get to see this tall, lanky Texan talking about tomatoes. So at the Larry J. Ringer Library in College Station on Wednesday, March the 5th, right? It's a couple of weeks away. That's in College Station. I'll be talking about growing great tomatoes in the Brazos Valley. There's no registration for that program, but I'd love for you to come and learn a little bit about trellising tomatoes, tomato cultivation, as well as a few tomatoes that I can point out that I know do well here in our Brazos Valley region. Now, if everything goes well, I may actually have some tomatoes to give away as well. If that doesn't get you out there, I don't know what will. So if you join me on March the 5th at the Larry J. Ringer Library, I'd love to talk a little bit about tomatoes and celebrate tomatoes with you. There's other programs going along the area, but I think I'd like to get back to some of the questions that we had from some of our residents. All right, so I think I'm ready to talk about lawns. I'm sure you're thinking about lawns right now. I love to say it's a lawn story. A little play on words. So a gentleman named Glenn had wrote in and he asked, it was regarding liquid herbicide. that he could use on St. Augustine grass to kill Virginia buttonweed. So, some of these plants that I'm talking about on air, you may be familiar with, like fall aster. Once I described it, hopefully you'll, vision back to last fall and see this beautiful little daisy-like flowers in the yard, and know that some folks view them as a weed. For this one, Virginia buttonweed, it's a little bit more tenacious, I think, than fall aster, and sometimes a little bit more difficult to control and manage. It's a little herbaceous species. It's very vigorous. It's very weedy. It seems to just weave its way. If you've got St. Augustine grass growing, oftentimes you'll see it weaving its way up and down through the stolons of St. Augustine grass. The botanical name on it is Diodia virginiana. I love pronouncing some of these Latinized names that we provide for plants. Makes me feel important and smart, so gotta share that with you. But it is difficult to control once it's in the landscape. It has characteristics of a hardy invasive species, right? Very similar to fall aster, Virginia buttonweed grows very low to the ground. It can root itself quite readily by stem parts. It will produce flowers that will produce seed, and then, it's all over, folks. Once it produces flowers and they successfully produce seed, then it's a seed bed that will be available to germinate at just the right time of year, and then you've got more plants. So like with plants like fall aster, vigilance and removal, hand pulling, cultivating with a garden hose is always the best option for this. Unfortunately, for Virginia buttonweed, it's a little bit more difficult to do that with, unless it's a larger patch of it. So for fall aster, the way that it grows, fall aster now, I'm referencing something I mentioned a few moments ago on this program, fall aster grows kind of in a matted clump, so it's a little bit easier to take out of the yard, but Virginia buttonweed really doesn't. I mean, you might see it kind of mat up a little bit, but typically it's growing and weaving its way in and out of the grass that you're already cultivating. So if you can certainly try to pull that out with a garden hose, or get down on your hands and knees with a little prod and kind of tease it out of the ground. Now, there are herbicides that have been formulated, and it's a combination of active ingredients. Again, we try to stay away from brand names. But if I do mention them, I'll mention them in groups, right? Like Fertilome Weed-Free Zone or Bonide Weed Beater Ultra, or, brand names like that. But what it is a combination of active ingredients that contain 2,4-D, carfentrazone, dicamba, and mecaprop P, and these are post-emergent herbicides, right? So some of these herbicides need to be rated for use within the environment itself and rated for use to control the plant. How do you know this information? Well, for one, you can, of course, call me up at 979-845-5689 or send me an email at gardensuccess@tamu.edu, and I can provide specific information for you. Or, of course, you can read the product label. So if we give you a brand name of a product, and again, it's going to be several of them, because that's how we talk to one another, right? I'm not promoting any one product. Rather, I try to stick to the active ingredient, but it's much easier, I think, for us to talk about brand names, but it's going to be, one-on-one with that, folks. So anyway, getting back to the point, when we do identify a product, it's always best to read the label of the product, and the label will contain all the information that you need, right? An herbicide or any kind of pesticide, regardless of what brand it is, by law must contain all of the information that plant, that product, or that pesticide is appropriate for use. It'll be, they'll have information of the active ingredients, the concentration of the active ingredient that is in that product, the application rates, the timing of year that it should be applied, the target pest. In this case, is Virginia buttonweed rated is that product rated to be used to control Virginia buttonweed? There are some herbicides that are rated for use for broad application that will treat broadleaf weeds, right? But knowing that, the specifics come in reading that label. So identify whether or not the product that you're using is rated to use to control if that plant is listed on it, right? If Virginia buttonweed is listed on it. If it is, then there's the other information that you need to pay attention to. If it gets too hot, right, is that particular product good to use when we start reaching ambient temperature that hover around 85 to over 75 degrees, 80 degrees, 90 degrees, etc. It may not be. Is the herbicide, in this case a post-emergent herbicide, will it damage the surrounding lawn, right? For me, and what I recommend to individuals is think of post-emergent herbicides as a spot treatment. So you're going to focus that pesticide, that herbicide, on the plant itself. You're not going to be broadcasting it across. You're not going to take a spray nozzle and just spray an entire area or patch of your yard. You're going to focus that on the plant that you can. Now in this case, this gentleman is working with St. Augustine grass, and St. Augustine grass is very sensitive to a number of herbicides that are used as a post-emergent. So Bermudagrass is a little bit more tolerant of a wide range of herbicides that can be used for weed management in the lawn, but St. Augustine is very specific and very sensitive. So we need to pay attention to that information on those product labels, on those herbicide labels. And again, I can help to guide you with that specific information. So in this case, I've recommended to the client specific post-emergent herbicides that he can use on St. Augustine grass, giving him all these caveats, got to look and make sure that it's appropriate for use on St. Augustine. This is the time of year that you would apply this particular product, etc. Now there are specific products or herbicides that are used as a post-emergent for Virginia buttonweed that have had more success. Sometimes they have a combination of some of these other crazy sounding, scientific sounding names, right? Certain names of chemical names like sulfonylurea, iodelsulfur, I can't even say them, or thiacarbazone, or even dicamba. So it really depends. We tend to say that a little bit more often. I hear that a little bit more often from my horticulture colleagues. It depends what's going on in your yard. What is the ambient temperature? When are you thinking about when would be the best time to apply these products? What is the target species? It all goes back to what I began this program with, diagnosing what the challenge is and what will help to guide us on what action to take. And sometimes the best action is little or to no action sometimes. In the case of the passion flower, of course, if you want to see those butterflies, you're going to leave those plants alone. Maybe plant two patches of passion flower. In the case of weed control in lawn, it becomes a little bit more complex or complicated, but that's why we're here. Myself and horticulture colleagues, we've got horticulture agents in other counties as well. There's not a lot of us, but we certainly are stationed in counties that are supporting that our positions. Certainly, those are typically you'll see named horticulture agents in larger counties like Harris County, of course. College Station, Brazos County is a growing county, and I'm very fortunate to be able to serve you, residents in our area. We've got a horticulture agent in Fort Bend County, that's Rosenberg. There's one down in Brazoria County, that's where I came from originally, down around Alvin, Lake Jackson, and Friendswood. There is a horticulture agent in Galveston County. I transferred over there prior to this position here. And I'm telling you, folks, I'm not moving. This is it. I'm staying put. I love this area, and I love serving the residents of Brazos County. But we do have a horticulture agent in Galveston County, as well as in, I'm trying to think of the county name. It's a little bit north. It's where Conroe is. I'm drawing a blank. Well, anyway, there's another horticulture agent. His name is Michael Potter. I've got to see Michael yesterday. Outstanding colleagues that are here to serve our communities. There's one in Austin. There's another one, I think now down south, a little bit south of Austin, right around San Marcos, position that just opened up. The mighty David Rodriguez in San Antonio. So we're here to provide information to you, appropriate research-based information. So we can help you navigate some of these more complex issues like Virginia buttonweed in the lawn. It's not a lost cause. There are methods that we can use. Sometimes they involve an herbicide. And then it's up to you, once you have all of the correct information, it's up to you to decide which action you want to take to remedy that challenge in your yard. So again, thank you so much, Glenn, for the opportunity to talk a little bit further about a seemingly simple but somewhat complex topic like addressing Virginia buttonweed in the yard. Oh, for me, it's squirrels, right? Virginia buttonweed, I can let it grow a little bit in my yard. I don't have a problem with it. You know, one way that we can have that kind of get ahead of that is, of course, to cultivate our yards. And it can be, what I mean by that is grow healthy grass. That can be challenging in the soil profile that we have in urban areas in Bryan and College Station. We're blessed with bicarbonates in the water, which affects how the plants grow, the soil profile itself. You know, we do have some challenges for growing these beautiful, lush lawns. For the lawn that I'm in the rental house that we're in, it's a combination of Bermudagrass and St. Augustine grass. But I'm mowing it at the appropriate height. I fertilized that lawn once in the spring. It seems to be responding really well for me. I do have a little bit of challenges. You know, I do have some Virginia buttonweed in the yard, but the rest, mostly it's kept at bay in one tiny little section of the yard because I'm cultivating the rest of the yard, right? I'm helping that yard to grow to its full potential, that lawn to grow to its full potential. There's certain things that you can do that won't take a lot of your time, but that will help to cultivate that lawn. And sometimes it's just cultural, right? Correct mowing height, making sure that the property is watered at a specific time of year when it really needs it, when the plants are actively growing. Right now, we've come through a time of year where we've been blessed with a little bit more rain, and the grass is dormant. If you think about it, it's not actively growing right now. So there's some things that we can do to continue to let that grass rest for now, and then anticipate that you would apply fertilize that lawn sometime around April, right? Start thinking about that. I've got some more information, of course, I can always share with you. Part of this is this program, 979-845-5689, or sending me an email, gardensuccess@tamu.edu. Again, we're here to help you do the best that you can in the gardens that you have. Now, folks, I'm really happy to say that my wife and I are closing on a house really soon, and I'm really looking forward to living in a newer community and owning property that I can actually put some more plants in the ground, tell you some of the escapades that I have out in my yard and some of the successes that I anticipate to have as well. The cool thing about this property is it comes with some fruit trees, so I'm really excited about that. You may have heard me talk on this program before. I have a number of fruit trees, mostly figs. I've got a fig obsession, right? That are in containers, but thankfully I'll have a yard to actually plant them out in the backyard. There are some restrictions from the homeowners association, but hey, I play by the rules. No issue with me. I know how to make the front yard look fantastic and meet the criteria and policy set by the homeowners association. But fortunately, we're able to cultivate plants in the backyard as well. And so some of those figs are going in the ground. And they'll be joining a couple of peach trees that this property comes with. I believe there's a plum tree in the backyard. I've worked with plum trees when I was helping to cultivate the demonstration garden down in Galveston County. The Galveston County Master Gardeners and the horticulture agent in Galveston County have this beautiful demonstration garden, and they planted out an orchard that must be, they've been in the ground there for about 25 years, I think. And the orchard was set up at that time, and it's an outstanding display of different fruit trees that you can grow in that area of Texas. So that's the last time that I actually got to play with a plum tree, and now I'll get to do that here in the new house that we're purchasing. So I'm happy to report that I'll be able to expand my collection and focus on some plants that I haven't been able to actively cultivate in a long time. And of course, I'll keep you all up to date. I would love to share stories of my personal experience. I think that's what we share with each other, right? You've got some great stories about your gardens and the successes that you have in your garden. Of course, I would love to hear about that. But you got to call in, 845-5689. Folks, we've got about another 5 minutes on the air, but I'm really delighted to be bringing this program to you on a weekly basis. There are other events that are happening around town, of course, those events that are part of our usual, of our regular events that happen every week sometimes. Aggieland Farmers Market, of course, that's out at the Post Oak Mall parking lot. They're open from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. The Brazos Valley Farmers Market, which is in downtown Bryan at Main and 21st. They're open at the same time. Well, actually, they shut down, I think, about noon, but they're open from 8 a.m. to noon. It's always good to get out and celebrate each other. Of course, farmers markets are great social events for us, but they're a wonderful place to be able to support local organizations, local farmers, as well as get some great produce from those places. So I love to visit farmers markets, and I hope that you do too. One event that I was almost remiss in talking about, and it's coming up pretty soon in a couple of weeks. It's the it's the Bryan College Station 46th Annual Home and Garden Expo. And the only reason I mention that is that our Master Gardeners, the Brazos County Master Gardeners, and yours truly, myself, will be offering seminars throughout each one of those days. So it's Saturday and Sunday, March the 1st and the 2nd at the Legends Event Center. Now, I believe that there is a very modest registration fee for that. You can purchase a ticket prior to the event itself. You just have to find them online. But rest assured, we'll be there to talk to you. If you have some gardening questions, we'll be there throughout those 2 days. We'd love to connect with our residents and talk plants and best gardening practices, and we will have seminars that are scheduled throughout each one of those days. So if you'd like to join us, come on out to the Legends Event Center on March the 1st and March the 2nd. And if you see a tall person wearing glasses with a big smile on his face, that's going to be me, 6'4", Stephen B. All right. Yeah, so get out there and check out some of those events. You know, even though it's been very cold outside, I still got to get outside. I lived in Seattle, Washington for about 5 years. Was it 4 years? Oh gosh, it's a blur now. I think it was 4 years. And I had a great time. You know, when you're a duck, you got to get used to the water. And up in Seattle, it was overcast for a good 8 months out of the year, you know, with sporadic, once in a while, sun breaks would come through. We call them sun breaks. But for 3 to 4 months out of the year, it's just glorious up there. And I think that's what attracts people to that part of the Northwest. but I had the pleasure of going to school and experiencing that as well. And it didn't matter if it was raining cats and dogs or if it was just lightly sprinkling, you got outside. If you wanted to stay sane, you got outside to experience nature. And here we do the same thing, right? We've got beautiful sunrise right now. I'm looking out the window. The sun is just shining very brightly. It's a great time to get outside. When it's a little bit wet, we tend to retreat into our homes, right? But you can still get outside. So I'd suggest to go to some of the city parks, like Lick Creek Park, if you can, down in South College Station. Great nature center and trails that you can go explore some of the natural areas that are inherent in our city. So thank you for the city of College Station for supporting the programs and that beautiful facility down at Lick Creek Park. You may have some other parks that you'd love to go to. My challenge to you is to remember to get outside, and it doesn't matter if it's cold like it is right now. Maybe you're out there for 15 to 20 minutes. You can walk around, enjoy your yard, go out to another place and visit that, explore and get to learn about some of the native plants that we have here, or maybe explore a garden where there's appropriate plants, like at the TAMU, the gardens at the Texas A&M University. Again, they've got some great programs that are going on out there. They're no cost or free admission. You would just go and wander the gardens during the daylight hours. On the weekends, I think parking is free on campus. Of course, paying attention to those football games and other recreational sports that we love to support. But, while you're on campus, just go to the Leach Teaching Gardens. They've got great collections there. They have great examples of what you can do to dress up your yard and improve your landscape, right? Maybe you want to win that yard of the month with your homeowner association, with your neighborhood association. Kind of coming back to the house that we're purchasing, I'm hoping that there's a program like that in my community, because gosh darn it, I got some skills and I certainly want to share them with you and show them off too. So thank you very much for joining me weekly on Garden Success. We're here every Thursday from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. offering advice, talking about successes that you have in the garden, or maybe some challenges that we can discover and explore together. Of course, I thank our underwriters, Martha's Bloomers, for underwriting this program, the support that's provided by KAMU, our local NPR affiliate, great programs that we have here every Thursday, Waterful Wednesdays on Wednesday with Jennifer Nations in the mornings, as well as other programs that can and do make a difference in our lives and in our community. So keep up with us on KAMU and support the programs that are offered from this station. Again, thank you very much for your time today. I look forward to talking with you next Thursday. And of course, as always, I will see you in the garden.
You've been listening to Garden Success with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension horticulturist Stephen Brueggerhoff. Join us again next week as Stephen discusses your questions about gardening and landscaping in the Brazos Valley.
Garden Success is brought to you in part by Martha's Bloomers, featuring an expansive collection of plants and tools for the gardener, a boutique filled with art and home decor, and an award-winning full-service restaurant featuring handcrafted meals and a wide selection of hot teas and desserts. Located on Highway 6 in Navasota.